What you need back in the building. So I was thinking about the past and the present time, the past versus the present, and particularly about boxing today. And a lot of people talk about how the boxers are chasing money and they're not interested in the matchups. Let me try to explain something to you fans, and I'm going to give you from a boxer's perspective. So let me start with the fan perspective. Fans, we like to see boxers mix up with people who we think are intriguing, and they look like they'll be good competition for the boxer. But from a boxer's perspective, they are looking for big fights. They're looking for big fights, massive fights. The bigger the fight, and when we say bigger the fight, we mean guaranteed fights that will earn big money and will have big attendance and big pay-per-view, that kind of thing. Now, this happened after Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather showed us you could have a great legacy, and on top of that, you could also have the biggest fights possible and make the most amount of money possible. And this is where these boxers are coming from. And it's not like boxers of any era has ever thought like this. Any era boxers would have loved to have big fights. Any era boxers would have loved to have the kind of paydays Floyd got and the legacy that came along with it. It's not that. It's that boxers today have seen that it's possible now. So they're not just trying to fight any and everybody that they face, especially when they're put into a particular position where they're a world champion and they're doing well and they have a decent resume, whatever, etc., etc. They have a reputation. They want money fights. So Lomachenko, he wants Gervonta Davis. Devin Haney, he wants Gervonta Davis. Ryan Garcia, he wants Gervonta Davis. I haven't heard Teofimo Lopez call out Gervonta Davis, but I have heard Gary Russell Jr. call out Gervonta Davis. Why do they want it? They want the big fights. Gervonta Davis sells out crowds. He sells out arenas. He's an exciting fighter who's now going to be on pay-per-view with Leo Santa Cruz, who called out him as well. Big fights, big fights. This is what fighters do. They sacrifice their whole life and everything to get these big fights. They're legacy fights, but they're big fights as well. Gervonta Davis is a 3-time world champion. Okay, 2-time world champion, really. The third title is not a real title. And but he's a 2-time world champion, exciting fighter. Knocks out everybody that he almost faces in the ring. Big fights. Mike Tyson kind of looking small guy. So the big fights. This is what boxers are going after. The big fights. So, U.S. fight fans may say, oh, Gervonta, you should face Tevin Farmer. Well, Tevin Farmer wants Gervonta because it's a big fight. Anybody, and you mention Gervonta's name, they're going to say, oh, hell yeah, I want to have a fight with Gervonta Davis because he's a budding star that's making big waves and it looks like he's going to make plenty money and I want to be a piece of that. Okay, it's prize fighting, for crying out loud. So this is what he's saying. It's not that fighters are chasing the money. They're always going to chase the money. That's all eras they've been chasing money. It's not just that. It is about getting that legacy, but getting it while optimizing the amount of money you could make getting that legacy. Why not? It's prize fighting. Why not? So that's the era we're in. But the way how you go about doing that is not just by facing any and everybody. You have to face particular people that can give you the legacy and the big fights, right? So that is where this is coming from. Now, I wanted to make that clear so that you guys would know that, from a boxer's perspective, this is where they're coming from. And now that boxers are smarter, they're more business savvy, they're going to approach it that way. It's not that they're not going to face everyone, or at least all the top tier guys, the very creme de la creme, because one of the things, another thing that people say, for example, Pacquiao or Mayweather, they would say about them is, the so-called boxing historians and so on. They will say, oh, Pacquiao didn't fight the top tier guys, or Mayweather didn't fight the top tier guys, which is not true. He did fight the top tier guys, but then they would turn around and say, well, Mayweather didn't give all the fighters like Ali a shot. And I'm like, Ali was in one division. He drained out his division, then he had to fight whoever was next below. Mayweather faced the best of his different divisions, all of them. Whoever was the very number one guy in the division, once he was around, he ended up facing that guy. All right. And with Manny Pacquiao, it wasn't so much, but again, Manny Pacquiao fought the big fights. The big fights. The whole point behind Manny Pacquiao being considered this great boxer and he fought the big fights. He was and then became the money man. And he then picked big fights and exciting fights. See, well, Manny Pacquiao was always about excitement. So he wanted the most exciting fight he could find as well. Okay? And that's the thing you got to understand. Pacquiao's focus is a little bit different than Mayweather. Mayweather was about the big fights, the big money fights, and the best, the creme de la creme, the best of the best for him to pit against. But big fights. It must be big fights. Manny Pacquiao, I'm more focused on exciting fights. I want to make sure I have exciting fights. I want them to be big fights too. I want the biggest fight possible, but I want it to be exciting fights. So that was Pacquiao's thing. So you got to understand these things. Now, with Canelo Alvarez, all we need to know is what Canelo Alvarez focus. Canelo Alvarez's focus is an exciting fight. He wants big fights. He wants a lot of action. He wants exciting fights as well. Gotcha. But the thing with Canelo Alvarez is he doesn't have, he doesn't think, or maybe DAZN doesn't think, that these guys like Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo and Jose Benavidez, Caleb Plant, and Billy Joe Saunders, they're exciting fights. They only want a Triple G fight. Like a Triple G fight. All we want is Triple G fight. That's the one. That's the premier guy. That's Triple G fight. And all I'm going to say to them, DAZN, is you got to stop being so narrow-minded. Now, Canelo, he's the one with the drawing power, to be honest with you. He abandoned the pay-per-view model, which was a dumb thing, but nonetheless, whatever. The thing about it is you got to give Canelo some good names. Canelo must be allowed to face good names. I don't know what's going on with him and Golden Boy and DAZN, but you got to have good names when you're facing this opposition. So that's my thing with Canelo. And right now, Canelo, he won't be able to get the big fights. It's going to be more fan-led. So here's what I would push with people. The fight I wanted to see, and I still want to see to this day, is Canelo versus Demetrius Andrade. That's the fight I want to see, okay? And Demetrius Andrade is on DAZN, and I don't know what's going on with DAZN and Canelo, why they don't want to pay him. They should pay him the money they owe him, because that was the contractual agreement, and Canelo should be allowed to face either Demetrius Andrade, okay, or he's going to face Jamal Charlo on Showtime. One of those two guys. But if I was DAZN, I would be pushing for a Demetrius Andrade fight or a Triple G fight, all right, or a Callum Smith fight or a Saunders fight. I prefer him not to face Saunders because of what Saunders said. Shouldn't give Saunders a paycheck for saying shit like that. But if you ask me, the number one guy I want Canelo Alvarez to face as a fan is Demetrius Andrade. Okay? I know eventually he's going to have to face Demetrius Andrade. There's no if, no but so maybe. Whether it's at super middleweight, whether it's at light heavyweight, he's going to have to face Demetrius Andrade. But if you ask me as a fan, I would like to see Canelo face Demetrius Andrade. Okay? I'm going to catch you guys later on What You Need. Peace.